Okay, this is Jimmy Job, and you're listening to Motor City Rock Talk. Today, my guest is pretty much an icon in Detroit from back in the late 80s, early 90s, into the mid 90s. It's very difficult for me to pigeonhole what kind of style she played because she's played rock, she's played punk, she's played alternative, played in a lot of different bands, a lot of different music, hard rock, hard punk, ballads. Anyway, my artist that I'm interviewing today is Karen Monster. How you doing, Karen?
Hi.
How you feeling today? You all right?
Yep. I didn't realize I did that much stuff.
Yeah, according to what I've seen, you sure have. I was just looking it over. I'm like, holy crap, he's all over the place here. Anyway, let's start out just something simple here. Tell me where you're from originally, where you grew up, and how you got into music, rock music, whatever.
I'm from Detroit, and when I was little, I wanted to be either a veterinarian or a rock star. And my dog, Napoleon, got hit by a car. He lived, but I instantly said, it's rock star. I couldn't take him being so hurt. And, I did what I had to do to get him back. And I was 9.
Right.
And the vet was like, wow,
Yeah.
you're incredible. And I'm like, yeah, but I never want to do this again.
Yeah, it's
So,
very difficult, especially if it's your own pet and having to go
yeah.
through all that. Sure. So you want to
Yeah.
be a rock star? Okay.
Yep. And when I was 10, I dyed my hair orange.
Wow.
And I was very into David Bowie before anybody knew who he was.
Cool. Anybody?
Well, not anybody. I'm sure his mom knew him. But,
Okay. Fair enough.
but like, I got made a lot of fun of because people just weren't into him until Ziggy Stardust came out.
Right.
And I liked all the stuff before that. That's what I got teased for,
Really?
Yeah, like Hunky Dory and Space Oddity and The Man That Sold the World and that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
which later became pretty much everybody was into it. That stuff became more or less mainstream. So you were into him before, like you said, he became mainstream and people got back into that
Right.
part of his repertoire. Yeah, that's interesting because I'm pretty much along that line. I got into him pretty much with the Ziggy Stardust. Yeah, I got into him pretty much at that time, and there again, Space Oddity and some of the other stuff went back and said, yeah, that's really interesting. So he was obviously an influence on you. Who else would you say was influenced your early ventures there?
Well, Keith Richards, definitely. I would say Howlin' Wolf, and I would say Beethoven.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's some good company.
I took a Beethoven record that my father had when I was 5, and I still have it. It's traveled across the world with me. I just love him.
Any particular pieces on there? Are we talking symphonies or?
Some symphonies, some of the quartet stuff. I get the numbers all mixed up.
Yeah.
But
How do you think like Beethoven would have influenced you? Just from a music perspective or technique, or how would Beethoven have influenced you? I mean,
I think because of guts, he had a lot of guts, and he did what he wanted to do. He did it the way he had to do it. He was him no matter what. He and myself as well, I'm very connected to nature. It's, Beethoven would walk in the woods and read Goethe poems, and I think there's still a tree that's planted outside of Goethe's house or where he lived. It's this gigantic tree, and I think Beethoven and a zillion other people used to go sit under that tree. But so I like people that aren't worried about what people think.
all right, I get you. Yeah.
And they're just doing what they do because they love doing it.
That's interesting that you know that much about him, because I'd played his music before too, but I never studied him as an artist or knew any of that. That's really cool. That's really interesting that you know that. Now, you mentioned Keith Richards, and I could see a bit more of that in your style, your swagger from the videos I've seen of you. One of the artists that comes to mind, I was just wondering if, especially early on, you were compared to, because of your vocal style, was Chrissie Hynde from the Pretenders. Was she an influence on you at all? Or, I mean, not musically so much, but I mean, her vocal style and yours seem to be quite similar. And I mean that as a compliment.
Thank you. And I don't really take it as one because there was so much of it. And it made me change what I normally do. I didn't like having to do that. And, you know, it's always people say, oh, you sound like Chrissie Hynde. And I say, like, how do you know Chrissie Hynde doesn't sound like me?
Well, that's true too, but I mean, musically, as far as her recording, she'd been around, in the national scene, from the 80s. And I'm not saying you weren't playing in the 80s also, but I mean, on a national scale, that's the only reason I had thought of that. But I mean, you've got a lot more swagger and a lot more elements of punk and certain things that she doesn't. She seemed more alternative pop to me. I just meant the styling of your voice. I mean, it's natural. It doesn't sound like it's forced or anything like that. I was just curious if that came into play at all. But I could see how you
every day.
I can see how people were always saying, "Hey, man, you sound like Chrissie Hynde, man. You sound like Chrissie Hynde." That could be, kind of a bummer. That's the only thing I could think of as far as your vocal styling. I'm sure there's other artists also, but it really doesn't matter. You sang naturally. You sound great. Everything you sang and stuff. And the other thing that's really cool to me about the stuff I've seen and heard is you're so unpretentious up there. You can tell it's real. And I think I remember that from the few times I saw you back in the day at Lily's, that was like, wow, she's not a poser. She's really into this. This is really cool. Was that a big part of your thing too? Try and keep it real?
It's just how I am. So I guess it comes with the territory. I'm that way whether I'm at a store or whether I'm on stage. I mean, I remember after Johnny Thunders died, I did an acoustic show, and I will never do that again.
Yeah, I heard some of those recordings. That was excellent. I mean, it was very haunting, and it sounded very personal, but it was excellent. I mean, so why do you feel you would never want to do that again? Did you not feel comfortable doing it?
I just, as one single person up there by myself, I just feel really uncomfortable. Like, I didn't feel uncomfortable doing the recording.
Right.
But I made a mistake when I was up there, and I learned a lot because I just started laughing, and the crowd started laughing, and I thought, nobody has to be perfect for anybody.
Right.
And people make mistakes.
Absolutely.
And everybody's, trying to kill each other with how much Aquanet they have. And, it taught me a lot, because when I made the mistake, I just started laughing. I was like, I just blew that. And people laughed. And that made me feel good. It's like people just want to come and they want to have a good time.
Sure.
And, I wasn't gonna, I've never been a big pouter, so I wasn't gonna start pouting and saying, oh my God, what do I do? And walk off stage and, so.
You mustered through it, the pro does. So, going up there's a solo thing on acoustic guitars. I'm sure it's difficult. I've never done that, so I can imagine it's difficult. But
the hardest audience I ever had in my life was when one of my nephews asked me to come play at Show and Tell. The audience was 4 years old, and they were the meanest people I've ever met in my life.
Were they throwing their milk at you or candy or what?
Just about, here's a go-gurt, across your eyeballs,
Oh man.
And then what I made a big mistake with them is I didn't realize what parents were doing to kids at home. And I said, does anybody like any Michael Jackson song? And oh my God, they were like, he's a bad man. And those are bad songs.
Oh,
and I was
no.
like, I don't think I can recover from this one. They're not having it. But,
What, you weren't going to go into Beat It or something? I would have thought you'd going to do it early, Michael Jackson. ABC, for a crowd that young.
It was funny. I mean, they were hardcore, and they don't lie. They let it go,
They don't lie. They just know what they like and what they're told not to like.
Yeah.
Let's get back to some of your earlier stuff. Well, first of all, one of the things I wanted to ask you, and this might be obvious, how did you get the name Karen Monster? Was that from being in the group The Little Monsters? How did that name come about?
That's how it came about, and I don't like it, but it stuck for so long, it just came, and people would, instead, my last name is Paternick, and, I don't have a problem, other than it's a difficult name, I can't even spell it, but I don't have a problem, like a lot of people do, with what their name is, and this imagery they want to, put out there. I was booking the gigs as well as everything else. I mean, I did all the advertising, I did everything that you needed to do to be in a band, I was doing. So instead of saying, this is Karen Paternick from Little Monsters, bar owners actually started just calling me Karen Monster. Because it was easier.
Right.
And then when the band broke up, I was going to do a recording. I didn't know what to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was dating Art Lysak from Lily's at the time. And he said, what about Karen Monster? He said, it's like Iggy Pop, like one normal name and one weird name.
Sure.
And I said, okay, because that's what people knew me as.
Right.
So I just didn't think it would last that long.
Right.
But that's how it came about. And it was because I was so much smaller than everybody else in the band.
Yeah, you do look tiny. In a good way, because I'm tiny. I know what that's like.
Yeah, and I mean, the bass player was 6'4", and the guitar player was 6'2", and I'm 5'4" on a good day when I stand up straight.
Yeah, me too. I know what you mean. That band you had with the Little Monsters that went on to more or less be the band that just went under the moniker and Monsters, just phenomenal musicians. Stuart Simon, oh my God. Some of the, what's really interesting to me is some of the stuff he played as far as against what you were playing, as far as the chord. You're doing these kind of hard power chords, and he's doing all this dive bombing type style that to me it seemed to lend itself more in a heavy metal thing. That was another thing that was real interesting. Was that done on purpose, or did that just come natural as far as the band?
It just happened. It was Mark Elliott was the bass player.
Yeah.
But he was also the bouncer at Bookies, and he always let me in even though I was underage. And then Mark was also, he grew up like with Marshall Crenshaw and the Crenshaw Boys, and also was Iggy's bodyguard.
Really? Wow.
And yeah, he did a lot of stuff like that. And I think it was 1984, and I was playing in this terrible cover band, but I knew, it was good practice, and that I was eventually gonna have a band with Mark. And Mark lived in different places in the country, so when he came to Detroit, he would always stay with me. And he asked me if I had anything on tape, and I said yeah. So I played it for him, and he's like, okay, the next time I'm in town, we're going to the studio. So we went to the studio that Stewart had set up called Audio Madness, and that was like at 7 in Woodward. And there were a couple more people in the band, and I just wanted to be the rhythm player. And it was kind of like whoever was there was in the band. So it just kind of happened like that. And then the singer was a girl named Leslie Jones, and her husband is a sax player. And Leslie told Mark, don't bring him back home all messed up, which Mark did immediately, and left him in a bush at 5 in the morning. So Leslie said, that's it, I quit. And Mark picked me up by the collar of my shirt, put me in front of the microphone, and said, you're the singer. And I'm like, I don't want to be the singer. I can't sing. And we had a gig in 2 days at Paychecks, and it was going to be the first Little Monsters gig. Terrified. I mean, I just never sang in front of it, and I didn't sing, period,
Not even backups with your voice?
Nope.
Wow.
Nope.
So you were you were pretty shy. Was it a shyness thing, or was it
Yeah.
You just didn't feel confident doing it? Because
Yeah.
like I say, seeing your performances, you don't really look shy. You look natural, and you look cool. Oh my God, it's so cool. It's like Joan Jett, meets the Sex Pistols or something. You look so natural up there. You look relaxed. You got a sick in your mouth. It's like crap. Back when you could do that in the clubs, So how did that first gig go then?
Pretty good.
Because these were your songs, weren't they?
Yeah.
You
I
had to
wrote all
memorize
the songs.
You had to memorize all the lyrics and all that. Was that difficult to do then?
Since I wrote them, I knew them, so it wasn't hard for me. But if somebody had handed me something that I didn't know, I would have to, try to remember it.
Sure. Were you playing guitar and singing, or just singing?
Yes.
So you were playing rhythm guitar.
Yeah.
Did you ever play any lead at all of any kind, or did you just stick to rhythm?
A little bit. When when Thunders died, I put out that acoustic record.
Yeah.
And I just basically overdubbed the leads that he did, which were not good. So it wasn't hard to do. So
Right.
that's and then there's another song that was on my record, Necessary Evil, that
Love that record.
Wayne Kramer came in and to do some leads on a couple songs. And one of them, he did such a bad job that when I was going home, I threw the tape out the window on Woodward.
Oh, shit.
And then people went looking for it the next day.
They went looking for it? That was what, the only copy?
And and they found it. That was in the DAT days.
Yeah.
And they found it, and then I just did a lead on top of what I had already played.
Yeah.
And it's another thing where it's very natural, and I made a lot of mistakes, and I don't care because I had fun. So that basically, I think, the only lead type stuff that I have done. I'm like a Neil Young lead player.
Right,
I take
okay, I see that.
one note,
Yeah.
and I just keep hitting it.
Well, he made a living doing it, so there's nothing bad about that.
Yeah.
So that's all cool. Speaking of that album, Necessary Evil, where exactly was that recorded?
That was recorded in Joel Martin's Studio 54 Sound. That's, I think, at Hamilton, just east of Woodward. I think the street's Hamilton.
Are they still
But,
around? Is it still there? Or is this...
I believe so.
Wow.
I mean, Joel did Eminem,
Oh, okay.
and he did the Romantics in the beginning, and
I see.
you know, he did, for a small studio, he did a lot, and some of it I recorded with Ben Gross and out in Canton at Pearl Sound. Some of it kind of took other recordings of songs that I had previously recorded but didn't put out, and Dave Feeney did that. I forget what Dave's studio is called, but he's a very nice guy.
Necessary Evil, was that put out on CD, cassette, vinyl? How was that released?
That was CD only.
CD only?
Yeah.
Because that is on, that whole album is on YouTube. That's such a cool album. And I've listened to some of your other stuff. Did you do any actual studio recordings with the Little Monsters, or was most of that live, or demos?
Demos, I think, are mostly what's online.
Good stuff, though. I mean, my God.
Yeah, that is where I can see the Chrissy Hine comparison the most. But at that time, I mean, the only difference is she went to England and I was in my room taking drugs, you know.
Yeah.
So I would have bettered myself if I picked a better hobby. But we all go through our trials and tribulations, I guess.
Well, I you know, like I said, wouldn't compare your music to hers at all. It was just some of the nuances of the way, you know, your vocal styling was, which fit to that. And not always. Some of the stuff where you're really belting it out, I'm like, holy crap, is this Joan Jett? And there again, it's not like I'm trying to pigeonhole you, but you're always trying to think of like, wow, what does this remind me of? It's so cool, you know, only because it's not on a national level, but it's like, no, that's Karen Monster, and that's who she is, and it's so natural and raw. Now,
yeah, you know, I did much better, like 1,000% better in Europe than I did in the States. And I got an email last year from a guy in Finland, and he said, you know, we're still playing you. And I was like, Jesus. I mean, one of the songs, it was called Pieces of Love, and that was on their, it was number 3 on one of their radio stations for like 8 months. And then I found out I was being ripped off in Denmark, I think. It was Denmark or Belgium. And I thought, first I was angry, you know, and then I thought, I don't have the money to track these guys down and hire a lawyer. And in a way, they're doing me a favor because they're just spreading the music.
Right.
So I'll embrace it. You know, you got my blessing. Thanks for helping me out.
So they were taking your recordings and more or less profiting from that.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah. Well, there's so little you can do with stuff that's overseas like that, you know, unless you've got money, unless you've got, you know, and even then, internationally, it's like, how do you pigeonhole that? But, yeah, I could see your stuff being popular anywhere, you know, whether it be underground or otherwise. That's really, really cool. You know, I would think your stuff would be popular over there. They always seem to be on top of anything like that, whether it be metal or rock or whatever, where the, you know, the national radio scene here, whatever's left of it, constantly moving on to, you know, it doesn't know what the good thing is unless it's playing classic rock, and of course that's been beaten to death. You know.
I mean, here, unless it makes some money, no one cares.
Exactly.
It's all about the money. And, you know, other than paying the people in the band, which I always guaranteed them payment, whether I had to pay out of my pocket or whether we did enough good that I could pay them from what we made. But I always guaranteed a minimum payment. And, especially when people had kids, it's like, can't go out there and not get paid. I mean, and that's what I don't even know what's going on now. I mean, my world of the Hamtramck bars and some of the Dearborn bars, and they're gone.
Yeah, they're all gone pretty much, yeah.
It's just gone. And when I first got back here and I started going out, I said, well, what time do you go on? And I forget who I was talking to, and they said 7 or 8. And I was like, what?
7 or 8?
I was like, I never got in the shower until 10.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
I never went out to see bands in Hamtramck till, 10 or 11 o'clock, because it was, well, of course, they were playing later also, but 7 o'clock, that's like, what, are you playing for the dinner crowd? What's going on
Yeah,
there?
exactly. It's really very strange to me,
And then the few bars that are around, it's like, it's so competitive to get in there. One of the ones that's in my neck of the woods, of course, is the Token Lounge, which of course has been around forever. I don't know if you played there, but now it's like, it's all pay to play. In other words, they're not going to pay you. You could be opening up for a national artist. It doesn't matter. You're not getting paid. You should feel honored that we're letting you play with the other 5 bands that are playing with you, and then the national artist. It's like, really?
Yeah.
We never made, I don't know about you, we never made hardly anything playing at any of the clubs. So for you to actually, pay out of your own pocket when necessary, the guys who's in your band, that's incredible. I didn't know anybody that would do that. It'd be like, hey, you wanted to be in the band? Hey, this is part of the business. But you actually, are you talking about on a local level, whether you were playing Lily's or Paycheck, you were going to get paid by the door, and you'd say, if we didn't get enough at the door, I'd make up the difference out of my pocket? Is that what you're saying you did?
Yeah. That's what I did.
How could you afford that? Were you working a day job
Yeah,
then?
I had to. I mean, there's no way I could do what I was doing without making money from a job.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't think people get how expensive Kinko's is when you have to whip off 1,000 flyers and hit the pavement and then redo it because somebody took your flyer off the window of another car.
Yeah.
I mean, when I talk about flyers today, kids don't even know what I'm talking about. I mean, it's everything is internet.
That's
internet.
Right. That's exactly it. It was like, wow, that would have been great back in the day. It would have saved a lot of hassle and time. But yeah, that was it, man. Flyers everywhere you went, they're not flyers. And we used to make them ourselves, and I'm sure you did too. But yeah, there was a big expense as far as that. And even making demos, taking the time to make a demo. It wasn't cheap. And all you were getting is like usually a 4-song demo on a cassette. If you were lucky, putting out cassettes. And you were pretty much a staple, because I know that I saw you several times at Lily's. Was that pretty much one of your home bases as far as playing? Or?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I did not like about Lily's, but they couldn't help it, is they had to have the stage divided because there had to be a fire door.
Oh, yeah.
So they had that back entrance where you went down the alley, and then you had to have another entrance to get out. And, jumping across, it was, one side was higher, and then the other part was just the floor. And then they built the other side up to match the height of the stage on the other side. So jumping across was a little easier.
You had to be agile in those days, for sure.
Yeah.
What was some of the other places that you played that you really liked play, or you felt you got a good response at? Do you remember?
I played a lot at Paychecks.
Yeah.
My favorite band ever, and I think it's anybody's favorite bar, is CBGB's.
Well, of course.
I mean, the sound is incredible, and and Hilly treated me like a queen. His daughter did the same. And, you know, I could play there one year and call them the next year, and they knew exactly who I was. And they were like, oh, good, are you coming? And I mean, they were just such great people.
Well,
And,
that's not Detroit, though.
no, but that's my favorite
Oh, I'm
place.
sure.
And the sound system and the sound guy, he was just incredible.
Did you see the
And,
movie they made about that party?
Yeah,
Was
I
that
think I
pretty much
did.
was that pretty much the case? I mean, when you were playing there, was his dog running around taking a crap on the floor?
No, I didn't see that, but it wouldn't surprise me if that happened, you know.
'Cause I mean, the place had so many cutting edge people out as far as the bands, Ramones. I mean, Television is the band that, from what I understand, was the one that pretty much first band to play there, since he wanted the place to be more like a country bluegrass bar. But because of the location, it didn't lend itself to that. But so when you got to play there, were you playing? Were you able to play like on a good night, like a Friday or Saturday, or did you
Yeah.
just show up? Wow, that must
Yeah.
have been really cool.
And I was usually like the third band, which I thought was the best place because you weren't so early and you
Right.
weren't you know, where everybody had gone home or was too
Right.
drunk to
Yeah.
notice. But
yeah, that's really
yeah.
cool. Who were some of the bands that you would have played there with? Anybody national as far as that?
I don't remember. I just remember myself, but I know I
Okay.
played with other bands. But I do remember being up there at one moment in time. Everything in me just stopped, and I was like so blown away by standing where so many great people have stood.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was just amazing. And I was like, Karen, sing. You know,
Yeah.
don't sit here and space out about, you know, where you're at. That was part of it too. Here, I don't know. I had a sound man that I like. A lot of the bars didn't have sound people that were staples. You
Yeah,
know,
that's true.
You kind of had to have your own sound guy, and it's unfortunate because he died last week. Was Chris Panak,
Yeah.
who was a great sound man, and
absolutely.
if Chris was there, I always felt safe. Like I didn't have to worry about the sound. I didn't have to worry about anything. He was on the money. And then there was another guy that I used pretty often, and his name was Jonas, but I think he went more towards like, I don't know if it was Indian music or he got out of rock and roll is the main point.
Mhm.
And but I used him. He was a good sound man. That's all I can really think of.
Like when you mentioned sound man, in my experience, it was like, you know, go up there, do a little bit of a sound check that, and they'd be like, okay, how's that sound? Be like, okay. And then you'd never see them again.
Yeah.
And you know, the monitors were never work. Of course, you got used to that. You know, the clubs we put, it was like, well, whatever, it's just the way it is. But it seemed that if you had a little nose candy that you could pass to some of these guys, that would all change. You didn't have to come up against that then if you had certain soundmen that you liked and they were going to do that. Did you ever come up across that?
I just paid them, and they were fine with that. So,
Yeah,
but like you said, you saw them at a 30-second sound check, and then you never saw them again,
Yeah.
including the gig.
That's what I'm talking about. In a couple of my bands, we opened up for a couple national bands, and I had told my band, the people in the band at the time, I said, look, don't expect you're going to get good monitors, stage sound. Just know what you're playing and stick with the game plan. And of course, that's what happened. They all cut out. But then when the national act came up there, they didn't treat them any better. And I was like, what? what the hell's going on there? And it's like, to me, that was always a major issue. And Chris, that you had mentioned, I don't remember working with him or ever playing a show that he ran sound for. He might have, but everything I've heard, this guy was good to everybody. He treated everybody with respect and treated everybody, like their music was just as important as the next. And God, that's awesome, and to my experience, quite rare.
No, he was really just a great, good-hearted person, And if he didn't like the band, he didn't treat them poorly.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, it's his reputation.
Exactly.
And, he was smart enough to realize that, where a lot of people don't get that. It's a shame, because it's not a hard thing to get. It's not a tough concept.
Like you say, you having paid these guys, we'd offer to pay them too, and they'd be like, no, I don't want that. You know what I want. It's like,
right.
Well, I'm sorry, we ain't got you that. Well, then you're out of luck, because the other band does. Okay, it happened a few times. Did you play tracks? I know you mentioned bookies earlier. Did you get to play a track?
I played a track a couple times. That was very early on.
What'd you think of that place?
I thought it was more of a pickup place than a music place. Difference between the, quote, east side and the west side is big. It's really, it always amazed me how different, not the bars, but people were. It's like they're, just there to get lucky.
Right. And so were the bands, a lot of the bands. We had talked about this before.
I think that's why they got in bands,
Yeah, that wasn't rare, man. A band, man, long hair, and you're gonna need chicks. Well, a lot of things, you do that, and you come to realize, oh, this is more work to be good at it, to be honest about it, and you could tell the bands or the artists that weren't about that, because they had such integrity. And that was the other thing I really, like I said, remembering seeing you and hearing your music to this day. There's a lot of integrity there. It's not candy-coated. It's straight in your face. It's honest. It's brutally honest. You're not afraid to swear. You're not afraid to use any kind of language to make your point. And to me, it's like, wow, because some people want to even censor themselves depending on the club, and you never seem to do that.
No. I had a couple of producers do some censoring. What I did in that case was I put out two versions. I put out the uncensored version and the producer's version, because the producer would say, it's my name, it's my reputation, and I could see the point of that. But I could also see that it's my song, and this is the way it goes.
If he knew you as an artist, why would he want to work with you then? If you didn't already know that about you, or didn't know that you used it? To me, that never made any sense, because that had to cost you more money to do that, and more hassle. It's like if I was ever working with a producer and he said, well, you can't say this, you can't say this, you can't say this, and that was part of your artistry, I'd say, well, see ya. You're not the only producer out there. Was this guy that important to you that you were willing to do that? And
the big ones, like Ben Gross, who was a big deal, and I liked Ben, and I still like Ben. And he's out in California mainly doing remixes for Blondie and bands like that, for like dance bars.
Right,
he's doing remakes that are, a 2-minute song made into 25 minutes. I could see his point that he didn't want a record that said fuck. And so I just put out a separate, I put out a 12-inch single thing.
So you had a major respect for the man. I understand. Yeah, I understand.
I mean, if they were somebody that I didn't, I wouldn't be there in the first place.
Right, exactly.
And sometimes I would slur what I was saying, so it would be like, did she say that?
Right.
And it's still that way.
Sure. Was that rougher for you in that sense, as far as like being a woman and being slightly censored, as opposed to, I mean, men that could almost get away with that and it'd be like, yeah, we'll look the other way. Did they think that was what, just wasn't proper for you, or as being a female artist, or just their reputation on the line?
I don't know, but I did think it was not fair. But I also knew I couldn't single-handedly really do anything about it.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, that was, I came up at such a weird time. It was like the indie labels were just starting. Then they became like part of major labels, like a franchise of
Sure.
a major label,
Like IRS.
and Sub Pop and
Yeah.
all that stuff. And then College Media Journal came out, and I think the only show they had at that time was North by Northwest. And then they started adding other shows with other directions, like South by Southwest seems to be a big one. But come out at that time when there was, CDs were just coming out. I laughed when I first saw one. I'm like, this is never going to work. They seem to work just fine. So it was kind of a mixed up time.
Sure, it was, yeah.
Cassettes were on their way out. It was a hard time to be a independent,
Where would your music have been being played at that time? Was it on college radio? Was there, I remember 89X. Who would have been playing your stuff, and did it get played at a national level at all?
Yeah, I got played at Riff a lot.
In regular rotation, or late at night when they normally would play that kind of stuff?
Late at night.
Oh.
DTE.
Right.
Is that the public radio station?
Yes.
Yeah, they played me. A lot of college stations played me. More college stations across the U.S. than just in Michigan.
Right.
When some of the people that were responsible for a lot of what went on in Detroit and moved to Los Angeles, like Mike Halloran, I think he might have played me a couple times, slipped one in there, and
right.
While he was in California. And all the guys from Cream, or most of the guys from Cream, ended up moving out there. And so it was, people were starting to spread out. I think college radio, they're more into it, and it's like they made this private discovery and they want to share it with their friends.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of music to me.
They're not out there to just make a buck. They're out there to share the music and try and turn people onto it, as to where populist radio is to make a profit, like I said earlier.
I talked to Karen Berg in Manhattan. She was the vice president of A&R. I can't remember the label, but she said, listen, Karen, I love what you do. I will tell you that right now. But the only thing we care about is, are you going to make us money? They told me some things that they would want to happen, which was get rid of some of the people in the band, and I wasn't willing to do that because I believe in bands. I'm a big believer in bands to this day. I told them, if something happens good for you, go ahead and do it, but I didn't do it myself. I would probably do the same thing today.
You're just very loyal band, and boy, that's a rare quality. You want to go for the gold, and all people say, all right, see ya, good luck, I gotta go where my dreams follow me. So they wanted to more or less make you the focal point of a band that they put together, something that they could latch you on to, in other words.
Wow. They had the band they wanted, and all they wanted from my band was me. That made me feel weird.
Yeah, because they could have had that much more control over you too. Once you signed to something like that, it's like, okay, Karen, we own you, and
Right.
that's something that as an artist, I'm sure you didn't want to deal with either. It's like, well, I'd rather keep my band and do it my way.
Right.
But
Yeah.
that had to take a lot of guts. You know, you had a great band. I mean, my God. And where are some of these people now? Are you still in touch with any of them, or?
Some of them. I mean, I did so many things with so many variations of both.
Oh yeah.
Like after Karen Monster, we did this quote unquote all star band, and it was guys. It was called the New Barbiturates,
Oh, gee.
and it was some guys from the Mutants and Mike Marshall, who has played with everybody. It was Jimmy Bones. God, there were so many people. There were the Mutants.
Yeah. Was
I
Art
don't
involved in
remember.
that?
Yeah, there was usually 3 singers. It was a big band. I mean, there were a lot of people up there, which
Wow.
I was not in love with.
Whatever
I
happened
mean,
with that?
no, nothing. It didn't go anywhere. I
Did
mean,
it?
it was fun.
Did you record any of that? Is that out there on YouTube or anywhere to see that in any way? Do you know?
I think it was recorded by, what was that label that was both Troy and Canada? And I can't remember.
Okay.
It was a big label, and it was the first one that would actually play local music like for an hour. It used to be ABX,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
it switched over.
Yeah,
and
I think I know who
can't.
you're talking. I can't remember that either. But
Yeah.
I know who you're talking about. And all that. 'Cause
But
one of the
they
videos I
had-
saw, you were in Toronto, playing
Yeah.
in Toronto. That looked like a blast.
It was really funny because some guy walked in off the street and said, "I can tell a Detroit band all the way from down the street." And I thought that was funny. I thought that was great. Just because I don't know that I sound like a Detroit band, but apparently I do. Whatever that sound is,
Yeah.
I'm glad to have it.
Yeah, it's
you
usually
know.
it's usually a raw, intense sound. That's what Detroit's known for the most part, from what I recall from those days, especially. You know.
Yeah.
And to me, I'd definitely taken that as a compliment. I am a Canadian. I know people in Toronto and stuff, and I can see them really digging that, especially at that time. You know, because there weren't too many bands that I knew about that from Canada anywhere that were playing that kind of stuff. I'm sure there were, but not that I was overly familiar with.
Right.
Anyway, Karen, I am going to let you go, and it's been great talking to you. I guess the last thing I wanted to ask is anything in the future as far as playing or writing or recording, anything you've got in the works or thinking of putting in the works?
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of writing. I've always woken up and the first thing I do is smoke cigarettes, play guitar, and drink coffee. And so that's when I do the best writing, I think, because I'm half brain dead and it just comes out better before I get pissed off.
Do you have certain themes that you like to write about, or is it just like relationship stuff or stuff you see in the news?
Kind of a little of all of that. Things that have happened to me personally, things that have happened to other people. I think it's a mix of
Sure.
how I feel about whatever subject I'm yelling about.
Well, it sounds to me that you could really probably write some really strong lyrics about this generation, this upcoming generation, and the differences between, you know, what we went through and what they're going. I mean, just a song about flyers and putting out flyers as opposed to the internet. You kids got it so easy today. There's some, you know.
Exactly. I think this generation needs a firing squad.
A little dose of reality.
I don't think they have an appreciation for where they're coming from, and that makes me sad.
Yeah. The stuff I've heard of yours is solid. I think it'll always be around. There'll always be an audience for that and for you. And I know in this town, people still know who you are. Because when I've talked to a few people telling them I was going to interview you, they're all like, wow, that's cool. We want to know what's happening with Karen, man, where she is and what's happening. Because we miss her and we want to hear more music from her. So if that's an inspiration to you, I hope it is. Keep working at it. Don't give up, striving and stuff, because it's never too late.
Yeah, I get a lot of, "Oh, I thought you were dead."
Yeah, well, when you're out of the spotlight or anything, you know, that happens. But I mean, there are people that still know you, and and want to hear from you. And it's a big part of the reason why I wanted to do this interview with you, bring it back to the attention of people that may have, there again, thought you were dead or kind of forgot about. Anyway,
Which
with
I
this,
appreciate.
anytime, Karen. Like I said, I love your music, and I think there's a lot to be said for the honesty and integrity of the style you played. Look forward to hearing some more stuff from you down the line. Okay, well, I'll let you go, and you have a great night. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Anyway, that was Karen Monster, and if you haven't heard her music, you need to check her out. Her stuff is just incredible, very raw, very in your face. The lyrics are facial. They'll trip you out and grab your heart. Anyway, this is Jimmy Jive, and as I like to say, keep rocking.